it contains land that's floodable. Well, I'm a civil engineer. I was fully also chief executive for many years. I have seen flooding in this area. I managed the 2004 flooding disaster and the response. So I know what a lot of this land around here is like, but I also know that this area where the Bunnythorpe Business Park is proposed, within the Mangoni Basin, is quite capable of being protected by relatively low stop banks and some cut and fill earthworks operations to establish slightly higher building platforms for development. And when you think about the city, much of the city is built on floodable land. It's protected by large stop banks around the Manawatu River. So the notion of building some flood protection there and developing the land should be something that's very, very familiar to this city. So I think it's an excellent plan. It consolidates the industrial development around the rail hub without creating the satellite areas of particularly D and E, but also C. And that would eliminate some of the infrastructure costs that exist with those other areas, C, D and E. It would reduce the costs of other services like sewerage, power, internet services, roading and so forth. So consolidating the industrial development would seem to me to be an excellent idea using this proposal for the Bunnythorpe Business Park. One of the other concerns I have, and it certainly affects our land, is the proposal to use more productive land, farming productive land, highly productive land for the purposes of industrial development. That just doesn't really make a lot of sense. One of the unfortunate consequences of the rail hub, a decision I personally didn't agree with, but one of the unfortunate consequences there is a lot of the land around that is now tarnished by the presence of the rail hub. So what better place really but to consolidate industrial development rather than spreading out into the wider reaches of this city's boundaries and establishing these satellite industrial areas. It disappoints me also to recognise, and I've been there 30 years building my farm, so yes, I've got a lot at stake with that property, but it disappoints me that when the boundary change occurred 10 years ago, it was explained to us that the reason for that was to resolve some of the issues with roading. That is all we understood until recently, when suddenly we were ambushed with this proposal to develop these additional industrial areas. We didn't take it particularly well to read in the Manawatu Standards comments from the city planner that we could have expected it. That was really insulting and made a lot of people quite angry with this process. Maybe it's why more of them aren't here today, because not only upset, but they're inclined to think that a submission wasn't worthwhile. But we did find those comments insulting. We didn't expect the proposal that came through. The most unfortunate thing for our property, and that's areas D and E collectively there, is that the strategy puts our properties on death row for 28 years. Death row. We're paralysed in terms of ability to sell. We face big losses in value. I've heard today comments that, well, it's only a strategy, there's a rezoning process to go through. You've got to realise that proverbial cow manure has been dropped on all of our areas. No developer is going to be interested in buying our property 25 years out from any action by this council to rezone. And no private buyer is going to be interested either, given the limited lifetime for it. If you want our area, my property to be part of an industrial area, buy it now. I'm not going to stand up and say, no, you can't do it at all. I'm saying, buy it now or take it away. because that's causing immense harm and difficulty for all those people in areas D and E. 28 years on death row. We don't want that. So, Your Worship, that's where I'll leave my comments.
Thank you, Peter. So just a couple of things. Just want to explain what the process is here. It's not a district conversation. It's actually a city plan. So and look, MDC but in saying that, we're very, very involved with MDC. MDC aren't speaking at this, but they are speaking at our long-term plan. And Mayor Helen is on the governance group for Tūtanganui and actually has been very much part of the master planning. So none of this should come as a surprise to MDC. But look, thank you for your comments. I suppose the big thing I'm taking out of it here is around the timeframes. If your land is in, if it isn't in, you just want to know.
I do.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Do it now. Buy our land now and land bank it if in fact you can find a way to do that. But I think you've got to understand that there are consequences from your decisions, and you've got to be prepared to stand up to those and try to see some of the private landowners right around that. 28 years is just simply not fair. I'll be dead by then, and a number of the landowners that I'm talking about are all of a similar age to my own. We have no choice but to sell within a much shorter time frame than 28 years, and yet this puts us in an incredibly difficult position. But, Your Worship, there's an easy answer here. Swap out D and E, if not parts or whole of C, and buy into the Bunnythorpe Industrial Park, because that is quite conceivable as an option. It's being offered to you as an option, and it's much closer to the rail hub.
All right, thank you. No questions from my colleagues. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
Again, thank you for your submission. Your commentary, your submission will be taken into deliberation. Thank you. Right, now moving to KiwiRail, and invite Anna Allen, who's the Executive General Manager of Property, online. That's submission 109 to my colleagues. Morena, good morning. Anna, welcome.
Morena koutou. So I am here, and I've also got Pam Butler, a senior RMA planner in my team, who can answer any questions or provide support from the RMA perspective. KiwiRail have been very involved in the Te Tūtanganui master plan and support and the wider relationship through those parties. We certainly support the recognition in the future development strategy that the existing rail corridor needs to be safeguarded, and that these development patterns that we're looking at need to ensure its continued operation as a vital piece of infrastructure, both currently and into the future for the space that we have here. We've had proactive engagement and support that from PNCC through Tūtanganui, but also other parts of the city. So appreciate that engagement, and I guess we just continue. Our expectation is that this relationship will continue in the delivery of the strategy, and our key Te Tūtanganui relationships, are a testament to that as well. So I don't really have much else to say apart from that. We have general broad support. Pam, do you want to add anything into that?
No, just to echo that we have been engaged with about the new development areas in the city. I mean, we have a particular operational concern about the existing railway, and that's recognised in the FDS. We have an interest in how new development impacts on level crossings and level crossing safety, and certainly we've appreciated the overtures from the planners in regard to those new development areas, and hope that will continue.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Pam. Could I just ask a question around, you talk here around the existing, the potential new growth areas around the adjacent railway network, especially around Clovelly Road. And are you considering the removal of grade level crossings.
Or just, the party line, particularly from KiwiRail, is that we'd like to eliminate all level crossings if we could possibly grade separate them all or close them off. In fact, Auckland is spending a considerable amount of energy trying to remove level crossings to operate its metro rail time frame when CRL opens. So generally speaking, we're pretty keen to remove them. We certainly don't want any new ones or additional ones. Certainly with pedestrian access, we understand that there's desires, there's certainly a desire for cross connections, but we manage that very carefully. So certainly we have to think of safety clearly, and with additional traffic coming along in the future, freight traffic and potential passenger traffic, is that level crossing gates can be down a lot more frequently as we go along in the future. So there's those roading network implications have to be considered. So look, we have to live with what we live with, but improvement in that safety obviously is, we would like to see an elimination of risk if at all possible, but that's not always possible. So we have to work through those options.
Great, thank you. No questions from my colleagues. So look, again, thank you, Anna. Good to see you online again, and thank you, Pam, for your submission from KiwiRail. Everything will be taken into our deliberations, and appreciate you spending the time, obviously putting the submission together, but also coming online. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Ta kite.
Right, we move to colleagues to our next submitter, and that's Linley Arnard. You here, Linley? LG Futures Trust, and that's submission 110. Linley, you just need to, you can use that, either one.
Hi. Okay. Hi, as you said, I'm here for LJ Futures Trust. So while I agree with much of the positives mentioned here today, such as regional growth and employment, I am here to express my strong opposition to the proposed Zone C industrial rezoning in Roberts Line North. Thank you. I believe the site is incompatible with meeting the Palmerston North City Council's own strategic directional goals of a connected and safe community, an innovative and growing city, and an eco-city. I am here today as a directly impacted owner of 580 and 600 Roberts Line North. I am the fourth generation to farm this land that has been in my family for close to 100 years. My great-grandparents, Charles and Lillian Coots, were the first of my family to farm 632 Roberts Line, succeeded by my grandparents, Lois and J.P. Coots, and now my parents, J.K. Cootsy and myself. I would also like to note historical family dealings with this council and their rezoning have neither been fair nor just. Underhanded dealings with insider council knowledge of the upcoming rezoning plans in Awapuni and forced a sale of family land. This resulted in great financial gain upon rezoning to a former Palmerston North City Council member. If not questionably legally, then we can all agree morally reprehensible. Moving forward in time, my family owned and farmed a large parcel of land at Acautry Drive, which was then, without surprise, also rezoned from rural to residential. When the sale was refused, we were met with continual rates rises, excuse me, making farming unviable and unaffordable. The stress and ongoing legal back and forth caused my grandfather, J.P. Coots, significant health problems, and most impactfully his stroke, and led to the inevitable downward decline of his health. Due to the ongoing strain and health issues, the battle to keep his land became too difficult and the property was surrendered. As you know, this area of Acautry Drive is now a mass residential development. The area of my childhood driveway is now named Coots Way. This is an absolute token atonement for the shameful treatment to a person who dedicated his surgical career to the people of the Palmerston North Public Hospital. Thank you. I'm sure you will now understand my visceral distrust due to past and underhanded tactics used by the council, and now this plan, which directly contradicts past correspondences and assurances from the Palmerston North City Council. Past actions against my family have shown rezoning to be a tactic employed to acquire valuable land due to its favourable locations. I would not be surprised if your proposed Zone C plan is under the rules of acquisition for industrial development, only to be sold on to developers for mass residential housing and huge profit to fund the rail hub elsewhere, likely the ideally situated Kayunga Bunnythorpe Road area. It is quite unbelievable that a third rezoning plan has come up for my family in 3 separate areas of the city. Past histories and personal feelings aside, the following are the reasons I believe the proposed Area C is incompatible with Papaioa's strategic directional goals of a connected and safe community. Increases in heavy traffic load will cause a substantial risk to drivers and pedestrians. The intersection of Roberts Line and Kelvin Grove Road is already a troubled black spot with current commuter traffic. The introduction of mass heavy traffic will pose a significant risk to the safety of drivers and pedestrians of the popular Linklater Reserve, as well as the surrounding residential area of Kelvin Grove. The Roberts Line bore for drinking water taps into the aquifer directly under the farm and the surrounding areas. Industrial waste runoff and seepage poses a huge safety risk being located above a public water source. Unstable ground due to shallow groundwater and the large number of springs and waterways all pose risk to the structural stability required for industrial building. Noise pollution from industry and antisocial behaviour that the industrial zone brings, such as boy races, street drags and illegal fly tipping, will negatively impact and impede the residents' quality of life. Industrial pollution in close proximity to residential areas, residents will be exposed to a high number of toxic substances such as carcinogens and heavy vehicle pollution. I would also like noted Mount Mauganui's significant health risk and 13 premature deaths due to the poor air quality from their industrial area in close proximity to residential areas. The study estimated the social cost of the premature deaths and ailments was $22 million. The report was published by Te Whatu Ora in July last year and is available online. Next, I move on to the directional goal of an innovative and growing city. An offer to view the actual site to show the impossibility of this venture was declined. The primary planner seemed shocked and taken aback when viewing the outlook and commented on the extreme contouring of the land and the deep waterways. I suspect the land contouring map used for Zone C is incorrect and has been blindly selected due to location rather than any actual feasibility or investigation. This type of land will not cater to industrial development. The freight ring road and the proposed overbridge in Zone C is incompatible as cited above. The land is highly contoured, riddled with waterways, springs and groundwater. Developing this land to a barely feasible standard for industry use will be an excessively costly and foolhardy venture, especially where there are more suitable site-ready areas available. Height restrictions under the airport flight path and surrounding area render upward growth impossible. Outward growth is also hugely limited as Zone C is essentially landlocked by residential and natural land barriers, including the airport runway, the railway line and the actual hub itself located in Zone A and B. There is also zero real infrastructure in place other than electric and old phone lines. Properties on Roberts Line North are tank only. There is no stormwater, no sewage and no water. A huge amount of unnecessary time, finances and resources would be required where growth is already severely restricted. Lastly, moving on to the directional goals of an eco-city, Industrial Zone C will have a catastrophic impact on the environmental well-being of the area and regional impacts to the ecosystem. Decades of consistent soil testing show this area is Martin Loam Silt and is classed as highly functional food production land, which is protected by a national policy. 500, 600 and 632 Roberts Line have been used extensively for crop and food production for nearly 100 years. Industrial development will irreparably pollute this highly productive land. The extensive waterways in the ponds contain native bird life and the at-risk longfin eel. The reserve area that is marked on Zone C in the plan does not cover the vast extent of flowing waterways and ponds that support the native vegetation and life. The aquifer and the drinking water bore has been mentioned. Pollution and runoff, industrial soil leaching into the aquifer springs and waterways, many of which eventuate into the ocean around Foxton, will not only risk human health but disastrous ecologically. I understand growth and development are positives for the Manawatu. I ask common sense to prevail and you to look towards moving Zone C to a better suited area. This is the Kayanga, Bunnythorpe Road, Milson's Line, Roberts Line area. As mentioned previously, this has already been offered to Seoul. There is already industrial infrastructure in place, such as stormwater, sewage, power, and internet connectivity. It is currently an industrial area, so it's primed for expansion. It will also cater to expansion upwards and outwards and with greater and easier access to the rail hub, the distribution centre and the large-scale businesses already there. This area will limit impact to the public and provide greater safety and quality of life for residents. I believe it will be far less environmentally impact due to the area's lack of waterway springs and the aquifer drinking water source already located on Roberts Line. On a personal note, I object to Zone C, as extensive works are already in place to continue building 580 and 600 Roberts Line into a sustainable, ecological, long-term food farm. The goals set in our business plan is planting for future generations with carbon efficiency and low environmental impact. The civil eventuation, organic accreditation and possible tourism opportunities for the region, details of which are provided in my submission. The aim has been a high-yield, low environmental impact approach. The extent of planting plans in place are to capture the typography of the natural positives of the land. The highly contoured steeps and inclines of damp, waterlogged land leading down to waterways have been planted with truffle and nut-producing trees to not only benefit from the waterlogged ground, but to also provide stability from slips and erosion, while enhancing with planting and restoring the numerous waterways, ponds and springs. The purpose has been to make the most of all areas of the land by use of specific planting for each area. This will also meet the carbon offset scheme via the ATS registration. Inquiries to the Council regarding building consent in January 2023 were declined by Steve McNichol. This was due to the highly functional land clause. I was advised that my land may only be used exclusively for food production. So my question to you is, how in the space of just over a year has the Palmerston North City Council stance changed from the soil quality being so high and productive that I was unable to build my home on it, to it now being only good enough to bowl everything, covered with factories and concrete, an industrial wasteland? My story is only one of many affected families in the proposed area, but it's important to note that all works planned and undertaken have been for the purpose of continuity and succession of my family living on and farming this land. This is with respect to generations past and hope for generations to come. Thank you for your time and consideration. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Yes, we do. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. Kia ora. I did have a question. Having said that, I think you have in large part answered what my question was going to be. but I'll put it to you anyway in case you want to add further. I really wanted to better understand the direct impact on you and your family in terms of the opportunity lost with the scenario that's been put through the FDS. So if there was anything you wanted to add to that, I'd be pleased to hear that.
Sure. As in my submission, we have had this land for a long time. It's succession generational. To have this loss would mean that my future, my children's future, and onwards is gone. This land was set up in a trust to continue that on. To have that gone, would mean that I have no future. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, thank you very much, Lynley. Some of the comments you've made, I will actually ask some officers to get some responses to you because it just doesn't seem right. So I'll do that offline to you. I'll talk to you later on. Yeah.
To have this happen 3 times to my family, to my great-grandparents in Awapuni, to my grandparents in Akautri, and now in Roberts Line North to my parents and myself, it just seems ludicrous. Reading this and thinking about it now seems crazy that again and again and again this has happened.
Look, thank you for your submission. It's all your commentary will be taken into deliberation. So appreciate you coming in and
Thank you for your time.
and speaking to us. And we will actually get back to you about some of those other comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, right, we move on to submission 131, and that's Stephen Kelly. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. Thank you, everybody. Give me a moment. I appreciate the opportunity being made to talk to you today. And I just want to, I've only got a few points and I think I'll be quite brief. Look, the first one is, I guess, while these situations are very difficult for people, I've actually appreciated the fact that the council have come out with a plan and allowed significant consultation. And I've personally felt the consultation process has been adequate at this point in time. And I recognise that there are some limitations to what can be done and what can't be done. That said, I think there are limitations in what's being proposed, and I've got no doubt you've heard a number of submissions, and I've been listening to a few of them about the way they impact on people. And it's got to be said that the potential rezoning definitely does lead to uncertainty for people and landowners in the area. I'm at 335 Tutaki Road. It's in stage 2. With proposal to be impacted by 2030, 2032. The piece of land I bought in late 2022, so it's a fairly recent purchase as well. Originally bought 37 acres, then sold off a portion to be left with 22. And the proposed changes would see a part of the land becoming wetland and an access road, a part of the land becoming zoned industrial, and a part of the land being left as remnant rural. And that leads me to, I guess, my key points. First and foremost, when I look at what's being proposed, it worries me greatly that the council is suggesting that they wouldn't do the detailed planning and survey work for stage 2 until 2030, 2032. Now, that would mean that myself, and you've heard other people say that today as well, would have a great deal of uncertainty about our property through to that period of time. If indeed, after the considerations are made as submissions, it was to go forward, I would be expecting council to try to take the detailed survey work as quickly as possible so that people who are in affected landholder areas can actually get some certainty about whether they hold the land or sell it off to a third party or get purchased by council, depending upon what the land is identified to be done. Now, you know, I can provide you one very personal example. Very recently, a position was offered to me in Australia, which I turned down for several reasons, one of which was the fact that all of a sudden the land on which I purchased known can't be sold reasonably to either a residential or an industrial investor in any way, shape or form. I don't think anybody would look at that land at the moment and go, that's an attractive proposition. Now, I have to be honest, that was not the primary reason for not taking the role, but it impacts upon people in their decision making, and I'm sure other people are being impacted in a much more significant way. So I'd like to see, if this continues to go forward, that the council do the necessary work to get to a final position on where the lines on the map are going to be drawn as quickly as possible. And I think as quickly as possible probably means sometime prior to the end of 2025. The second thing which stands out for me is that the land at the moment, which is identified as being used for wetlands and or access road, that would need to be purchased, I'm assuming, by council in a short period of time. And if indeed the survey work and the detailed planning work was done quickly, that purchase, I think, should be undertaken as quickly as possible as well. And in my case, that's a back third of the property. And if that's going to be taken by council for a particular purpose, then I'd like to see that progressed as quickly as possible, because I think that's reasonable. The third part, which is actually more confounding for me, is the fact that I'm left with, if this proposal goes ahead, 1/3 of the property roughly being remnant rural land, which is a fairly pointless piece of rural land at the end of the day. And I think there needs to be some very careful consideration to how a particular property might be impacted, and how any remnant land is dealt with by council, either as being deemed mixed use or some other purposes which would allow the land to be utilised more effectively than is being proposed at the moment. So if you imagine if it went forward at the moment, as it's currently proposed, I would end up with roughly a 10-acre block at the front of the property, which isn't where the house is, which could potentially be sold. But that's a fairly tiny and fairly pointless little piece of rural land for somebody to actually want to do anything with productively. So my key point, I think the consultation has been reasonable, but I would like to see council commit, if this goes forward, to making the final planning decisions as quickly as possible, so that people are not left in a position where they can't move forward with their life in an effective way. Which goes to, I think, the speaker 2 or 3 before me, who said if people would walk up and offer to buy the property today, that would be a way forward. I don't think that's going to happen, but at least if the planning process happens quickly, it comes about more quickly. That would be me.
Thanks, Stephen. So really, your message to us is more certainty before 2030, as quickly as possible, or don't chop it up at all. Is that what you're saying?
I am. The property itself, we chose it very carefully because it's accessibility to town and so forth. But if it is to go forward, let's make the decisions quickly, move the planning forward quickly, provide people with a point of certainty.
And can I get an understanding you're in Area C, is that right?
I think so. Stage 2 in, yep. Yes.
Area C, okay.
Area C.
Just so my colleagues know exactly where that is. All right. There are no further questions, so thank you, Stephen, and appreciate you coming to the sessions. I saw you at Bunnythorpe and putting the submission in, and again, your commentary and submission will be taken into the deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, we move on to our last 2 submitters. Christine Staples. Christine, welcome. And this is number 116.
Hello, thank you for hearing me, and thank you for our little talk the other day. It was very enlightening and really good to do. Just wondering how many here have read my submission. It's not a terribly long one. It's quite clear cut, and you'll be very aware of the swell of public outrage at some of the things I've mentioned regarding high density housing, traffic calming measures, and uncontrolled spending on new amenities. Just want to talk just briefly about high density housing. I think that should be only in the central city and not out in the suburbs. And the reason for that is I think that the people who would be in high density housing will be the ones more likely not to need cars, like older people, single professional people perhaps, or people who are unable to work, that sort of thing. And I don't think it's appropriate too much in our community anyway to have high density, high rise housing out in the suburbs. Part of the reason that we bought in Palmerston North and moved here was so that we could have a place with a section where we could have a garden and grow our own food. And to quite a few people, that's becoming even more important as food prices, get larger, etc. The other thing I want to talk about quickly is traffic calming measures. I think that it's really important to look at some of the hazards of what's been happening with that. I'm a cardiac arrest survivor. I'm lucky to be alive because the ambulance got to me within 5 minutes of calling them from Palmy, and I was living in Palmy at the time, which was awesome. I also had 2 subsequent heart attacks, and the same thing happened. If the ambulance had not arrived in time, I would not be here. And I'm very aware, I was in the cardiac clinic last year, and in 1 week last year they had 100 new referrals. I believe this is post-vaccine referrals of myocarditis and other issues. And I was talking to the nurse there and she said, we are totally overwhelmed. The ambulances bring them in and are referred to us. So there would be many more people. If the ambulances can't get to them, if fire brigades can't get to them, then they won't be alive. And a lot of these people are younger as well. So just saying, Waka Kotahi, I looked on their website to see what they said about traffic calming measures, and they give some ideas as to, how to adjust these for emergency vehicles. And I don't think those have been taken into account in the city that I can see so far anyway. But in this submission, I want to address the larger issues that are responsible for the decision making at a council level and also governmental level. It all just trickles down. There are entities that have influenced decision making and spending for some time. These promoters of the so-called public good are not from the Manawatu and are not from New Zealand. They're nameless, faceless social engineers who live on the other side of the world. They work in the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, and they have a massive network of NGOs and other organisations that have been set up to run the Western world. In New Zealand, these entities and their philosophies and policies have infiltrated into every echelon of our society. Policies and ideals, in case of councils, they would be climate change, smart cities, traffic calming, emissions reduction, high density housing, managed retreat, and yes, 15-minute cities. I actually found that one on the Local Government New Zealand website, even pictures of your 15-minute zones. So I was talking to some of the councillors at the Palmerston North Residents, the new group, Palmerston North Residents, that have started up. And it was interesting because none of them had heard of these things, but it was very clear that they are there, and it seems to me that many councillors don't understand and don't know them. We have relatives, or family actually, in Canada and Australia. And also I have a friend who lives in Britain, and her daughter was at Oxford University. And all of these things are being rolled out in these cities as well, in different areas, in fact, all around the world. So this is not what some of these things are proposing. The smart city stuff, the traffic calming, all of those things are a worldwide thing. They're not just New Zealand. And so I'm just very concerned that unelected bureaucrats are manipulating elected members of councils by withholding information that would balance the arguments, perhaps, and secondly, providing so many unnecessary changes and charges and paperwork. I just looked at all of the plans and the paperwork that comes out. I don't know how you guys cope with it, to be honest. Might take my hat off to you, actually, if you read it all and absorb it all and understand it all, because there's such a lot nowadays to deal with. And I know that maybe our population is increasing, but does it have to be so complicated in many ways? Can we not simplify some of the things? The other thing I think is their plans are not always about us. It's often about them and what they want to do with us and with our country. I'm really appalled and feel quite disappointed that some of the councillors are unaware of these agendas that drive our short-term and long-term planning and our even societal changes. We see that really clearly over the last probably decade, really. It's almost like people are driving in the dark with the headlights off if you don't understand these things, to me. Being led but not prepared for what's coming ahead. And what's coming ahead is things like, Agenda 2030, that sort of thing. You are responsible for ensuring that these policies and the origins are made clear and openly discussed, I think. And I've given you some pictures here. The first one is COVID-19, The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab and Thierry Mallory. And it's the book, that's their book cover. The next picture is the World Economic Forum and the United Nations sign a strategic partnership framework. They are actually working together, so the UN isn't working on its own in this, it's working with the World Economic Forum. It says the partnership identifies 6 areas of focus: financing the 2030 agenda. If you don't think that's real, go on the World Economic Forum website and have a look. There is an agenda. The very, very last part, when I looked at the World Economic Forum site, said you will own nothing and be happy. And part, I think, of the massive spending that our government has been doing, past governments, probably this one will too, and councils have been spending, are going to so impact the population that we are going to really, really struggle to remain even in our houses. Like we're looking at rates rises and that sort of thing, but it's not just rates rises, it's petrol price rises, it's energy rises, it's all sorts of other things as well. Food prices, you know what it is, you've been there, do it too. And I think that the time may well come, as it has for one or two people that I've heard of in America. One's one of my sister's friends. Everything got so expensive in their city that they actually had to sell their house and go and rent a little place. You know, they had a beautiful home, they had to sell it and go and rent some little place because they just couldn't afford to pay the bills anymore. And this is a 2-person working family. It's getting that bad here, and I think we have to be very aware of spending. So as the local government minister said recently, you know, let's look at spending on the must-haves and be very, very careful about spending on the want-to-haves. And I think, please, you know, keep that in mind. I'm a chaplain and I work with people who have mental illness and people who have disabilities, people who are single and live alone, etc. And they're struggling. I've seen a massive difference in their lifestyles, the way they dress, eat, whatever. Some of them can't even afford to go to doctors anymore. Can't afford to have pets, can't afford decent clothing, can't afford a car anymore because the cost of living has risen so much, and it's affecting us all. Anyway, I just want to leave that with you and just be very aware that many people in the city are struggling. Please don't make it harder for them. Please make sure that if there's things that you want to spend on, like the new Awapuni Library is a case in point, I don't think that the amount that you're looking at, surely it could be reduced. Surely you could use some local talent in trying to design something that's going to be just as amazing, but not as expensive.
Thank you, Christine. We're well over time, so I appreciate your commentary. Thank you for your submission, and all your comments will be taken into our deliberations. I'm sorry, Councillor, we've run out of time there. I'll just invite our next submitter, Ian Staples, up, and that's 117.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. First, though, I'm rather disappointed that there's only a small number of councillors here. Anecdotally, we've found that a number of the councillors seem to be quite ignorant of what's going on with all this, and I've asked them if they've read all that stuff, and they made out that they've got it on their computer, but whether they've read it or not and understood it, that's another matter. For the staff, it's all very well because they've been probably working on that for I don't know how long. So it's been developed along, and I understand all that. But when I went to get I'll just put this into the LTP plan, this one here, took me 4 days to read that. I asked for one down here, and they said, oh, we'll mail one. I'm still waiting. Not very good form. Now, I need to talk to you about, as a father might talk to their children. There's a number of things that I don't know whether you understand or not, but the rates pay your salary. We'd rather like you to understand that if we pay your salary, then you should be working strictly for us. Okay? It's pretty important, that. And as I understand it, as this, what Chrissy pointed out with this Agenda 2030, it seems to me that you're working somewhat for that instead of for us, and that's just not on. Okay? Now, there's a little thing that came in from a press release, and it says here, Minister tells councils to priority must-haves over nice-to-haves. I want you to remember that. But in terms of the father chat to his children, getting those docs was a rather sad exercise because they seem as though they were not really being made available in paper form. I think that's not very clever at all because you have a statutory requirement to make them available. And just because I knew that, I was able to get the documents I wanted, particularly the FED ones. And with those, I got these other ones here. This development contributions policy, which I didn't even know existed, but I got it because I pushed, and I do that. So that's okay. And those should have been freely available. When you go down there, they should be able to reach behind them and get one and give it to you. That's what the rules are. Okay, enough of that. We've done the father bit. Now, I presume that you've read my small submission. And well-functioning environment, that's about the first one in there somewhere. I've come up with, I've given your council a BBB rating. That's bumps, bikes and buses. I just do not understand how intelligent people can make such stupid decisions. It's just incredible the way that that's turned out. That farcical nonsense in Featherston Street, where did you get that from? But what I've been told is that you didn't even know it was going to happen like that. It was done by Horizons. What? It's happening in your city and you don't know? Good grief. What is this? This is what I'm talking about when I say you've got to work for us, not for that other lot overseas. It's just not on. Anyway, enough of that. Next. This microphone's sort of a bit too directional. Growing up. Yes, these growing up situations need to be well spaced because otherwise you're going to end up effectively with shadow areas and you might just as well build terraced housing. And the other thing about it, a lot of the constraints that you get within these new divisions, you'll notice that just about everyone these days, when they develop something, they put up a 6-foot fence. And when you're standing, those people are shorter than 6 feet, and when they're walking around, they can't see out. So when you need to grow up a bit so you can have an upstairs window, you can have a look and see over all these jolly fences. So, but these bumps, the bumps are everywhere. There's enough tarmac and those stuff to fill up all the potholes just about from here to Cambridge, because we have this patchwork highway, but this side of Cambridge. So that's what we're looking at. Bikes. Oh my goodness. How many bikes are there actually running around in the city? A very few that I see when I'm travelling around. And now you've got this new thing which looks like a pedestrian crossing with a bike crossing on it. Now how legal is that? Because I suspect that bikes will just not get off their bike and walk. They'll race out there across there, and if they don't get clobbered, we're behind from a bus or behind a car coming behind a bus or cross past a bus, then they'll get clobbered. Safety? Yeah, right. So buses, again, I keep looking at buses to see how many passengers are in them. Most of them are empty. There's 2 or 3. I don't know how you can get the economics of that to work out, other than sucking off the ratepayers to do them. Electric buses, well, and that in itself has got something that you're going to learn about in a short time. They have fires. I've seen rows of buses burning on the television screen. And so, I don't know, you'd be much better if you convert your diesel buses to ammonia. It's a much better fuel. It's just water and gas that comes out, no pollutants whatsoever, and you can still use the same engines. So that's the sort of thing that needs to go on. Growing in, that's the 2-metre fencing problem. Vehicle access, anti-social problems will turn up. Now Bunnythorpe, for workers, why has Bunnythorpe been left out of the loop? I think Bunnythorpe's a good place, perhaps if you're going to continue, maybe not from what the previous person said, but Bunnythorpe's got the area where you can build a lot of houses, infill, because they've got big sections, and those people would want to perhaps be out there and work in that new industrial area that's growing. So that's just a thought from me. Growing out. Green fields, yes, but drainage. Now, we all know that Palmerston North and its surroundings stand on this clay stuff that if you farm it, you can dig drains deep enough and run the water out with mould drains and things, and it works quite well. But in a city environment, you've got no way of doing the drainage to get that percolation through that soil, and effectively you've just got a pan that when it floods, it sits on top and slowly goes away. So that's a big deal for the one there on the other side of Amberley Ave out to that area, because that's fairly downhill and quite wet anyway. So it's good luck. You'll have a lot of fun with that, getting that right. The other thing with that is there's this situation of grouping ethnic groups, that's an interesting thought, because what we want is everyone to assimilate. You know, we want New Zealanders out of all these new ethnic people that are coming into this country. And then someone said there's about 100 and something of them, and all these groups. Much better to become New Zealanders, as I see it, because that's what happened with my ancestors. We came out in the 1840s, and we've been here all that time, and we're just about tangata whenua as it is. So, but that's a very important thing, that you need to be able to do that, because you don't need this business of the antisocial stuff. You want people to feel as though they belong to the whole place, not just areas of it. And I've got a lot to say about that when I come to the LDP, long-term plan, LTP. Yeah, Three Waters. I reckon that's your greatest problem, because you've made it the greatest problem, or you're making it the greatest problem. And I know there's issues with that, particularly in the downstream reaches of the Manawatu River. But the technical business of purifying water is now well known. They started and got it going on the spacecrafts, the space station. Israel do it all the time. They turn their wastewater into drinking water, and the techniques of that are better. And I suggest that you actually make a better job of that to get the water, which is totally recyclable. It might not be necessarily go into as potable water, but it really is available for perhaps a third main, which would be uneconomic to put in, as a watering gardens and all that sort of stuff, and go in the river as well. And I think what you need to do is spend some time educating those that are against the water going into the river as pure water even. They need to understand that that's the answer to what the problem is. And going on to this land thing, well, I don't think that's pies in the skies, and it's going to cost a hell of a lot. And when it comes to our rating on that, we know what's going to happen. You guys are going to say, oh, your rates are only $4,000. But without saying that the other $1,000 is on us as well. So that's $5,000. And that's all rates the same way. So the other side of that is, why do you have to go to an IFF when it's possible, or should be possible, to somehow use that same principle within the council so that you can do it in-house rather than out-of-house, and then there'll be no fudging on the rates. Don't you think? Yeah, okay.
Mr Staples, we're well and truly, I've been very generous with the time, so look, if you just want to very quickly wrap up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got going, it's quite good. Okay, the distribution hub, yeah, I like the idea of the new roading. And when it's built, it should be 4 lanes all the way. I know the Ashes Bridge is only ever going to be 2 lanes, but it's okay. Fitzhead, East Road, they're all that. Now, I see on Plan 14, is it 14, I think, where the roading, the new ring roading is on. It appears as though that new roading is going to cross the river to Linton. But it doesn't say that anywhere. It's just something, there's a line on that map which indicates it goes across to Linton. Now, the other one is that someone's trying to go down number 1 line and take it out past the rocket ship out there. Well, I think that's nonsense, because that makes the loop too large, and across to Linton is probably the best way there. And other than that,
great. All right.
Yeah,
well, look, thank you very much, Mr Staples. As all other submitters, appreciate you having the time to put everything on paper to us and coming to talk to us today. Your commentary and submission will be taken into our deliberations.
I really do hope you do.
Thank you. Colleagues, we're slightly over. Okay, colleagues, we will now break for lunch. I'll give you an extra 5 minutes for lunch, and we'll run over. So if you're back in here at 1:05, and we'll be into our next session of submitters. Thank you.